Final Fantasy XIV. I mean, wow. Back in June, I finished Final Fantasy XVI. I absolutely adored it. After finishing it, I thought, I want more. In particular, I want more of this team's work, between its story, cinematics, characters, and of course, music. I had tried Final Fantasy XIV last year, put maybe 15 hours or so in, and thought, this is okay, but it was around the time that a bunch of games were releasing and I jumped off, overwhelmed at the thought of 4 more expansions on top of the base game. This time, I promised myself that I'd at least get to the end of A Realm Reborn, which is the base game. A week or two ago, I rolled credits on Heaven's Ward, the game's first expansion. Now, you must understand two things. Number one, I'm an idiot. Number two, I get excited by sales. So during the Steam Summer Sale, I bought 30 days of its subscription and its Endwalker expansion before I started my journey again. What is absolutely astonishing is the 90 hours that I now have on Final Fantasy XIV you can experience for free. Completely free, no strings attached. No cosmetics that are lumped in your face, no pressure to subscribe to its service, all of the base game and its first expansion completely free. And do you know what? I would feel like an idiot forgetting that all this would be free on the free trial, but I actually have no problem giving them 2 months of subs for the free content that I got, because Final Fantasy XIV is one of gaming's greatest gifts. Not just because of the adventure that you will go on, the characters you will meet, the plots you will uncover, the score that will leave you in awe, the friendliest community in gaming. It's gaming's greatest gift because it's the most player-first online game I think I've ever played. In an era rife with in-your-face microtransactions, forced fear of missing out on seasons, and experiences that are shut down as fast as you can spin them up. Final Fantasy XIV isn't perfect. Some itemization issues, some minorly weirdly designed encounters, and obvious fetch quest design, but I can't help but gush about what an experience this is to play, and I'm so glad I gave it another shot, because it truly, truly deserves it. So, why does it deserve it? Well, first things first, I have barely scratched the surface of this game. Like I say, I have 90 hours clocked, and that is literally just mainlining the game's story and quest. And there's so much more I haven't even touched, because it's not really what I get invested in. But I'm talking housing, guilds, side quests, harder raids and dungeons, leveling up alternative jobs, purely just hanging out, hunts, fates, which are the version's game of public quests, crafting, collecting, everything that you would expect in an MMO is here. For me, there really is something for everyone. It is astonishing. The problem is that it does come with one caveat, and that's time, as with any MMO. Whether that be the main quest storyline becoming interesting, the activities that you are physically doing becoming interesting, getting the resources that you need, etc, etc. I hate to have to be like, well, if you give it 20 to 25 hours, because that is a huge caveat. It really is, but when you consider the history of what Final Fantasy XIV once was, it is a genuine miracle it has turned out to be this way at all. They tore the original version down and A Realm Reborn was the beginning for the game again. So it's understandable as to why A Realm Reborn feels like they were trying to find their feet, because that's exactly what they were trying to do. It was a fresh start. So I have to start with that caveat. But if you can get past that, well, you're in for one hell of a ride. Like I say, I'm here for its story, its characters, its music. It is simply one of the best written games I've played. You'll go through text-based cutscenes and then the odd voice-acted one, particularly in A Realm Reborn, but from the post-patch content of A Realm Reborn into Heaven's Ward, it was clear they'd already learned so much. Everything then feels bigger. More voice acting, in fact, a recasting of a lot of its roles, which was probably needed since A Realm Reborn's voice acting was a little bit on the rough side. It's all just so well done, so much heart, so much passion behind every word said. Usually in these games, I would zip through a lot of the dialogue, and yeah, at times in A Realm Reborn, I did exactly that, because it also does a good job of hinting what is pretty skippable versus what you really should read or watch. Overall, the more you play, the higher the production value goes, the more interesting it becomes, and the more these characters develop. it should not go unnoticed that you can play through the entirety of this game from the start to its last expansion, Endwalker. No sunsetted content, no having to YouTube what happened here. I'm looking at you, Destiny 2. On top of that, the game is monetized through two things. Its subscription-based model. So right now, free to play is the main game, and Heaven's Ward, though soon it's going to include Stormblood, which is the second expansion, which that blows my mind. That's the thing. This game, it oozes confidence. It doesn't demand you to stay because it knows it's got an aura. It's got the stuff. You sub when you want to, and you cancel when you want to. No abhorrent microtransactions, never shoved in your face, and cosmetics and items that you can earn in game that are still fucking mint. Of course there's a store, but I've never once felt the need to even go and look at it because the cosmetics and everything that you earn here are excellent enough in the base game with a free transmog system. The game plays exactly like an MMO you imagine would. 3 roles: DPS, healer, tank. On my original playthrough last year, I went tank, and I think that might have been what put me off a little bit. This time, I went Thermitage. I have no idea how you say that, but if I butchered it, I'm sorry. Which then evolves into Black Mage, which is way easier to say. This is a DPS based magic range class that alternates between fire and ice with the ability to also cast thunder. Its systems are basic, but even after 90 hours, I'm not really tired of it, and I still enjoy it, which is pretty amazing to say. If you want to move from a DPS to another DPS role, or even change role entirely and move to a tank, this is what stands out about the game. You can do it all on one character. No starting over and beginning the main quest all over again. Just such a neat quality of life feature that is so appreciated within the game. Some jobs are locked behind expansions or reaching a certain level of requirement, which is sound since there's more than enough variety to initially sink your teeth into. Video games, particularly online. Raids and dungeons are a pretty common practice now. It's rarer for an MMO or multiplayer game to not have a raid or dungeon than it is to have one. Even Call of Duty now has raids. If you've been watching this channel, you'll know I'm a huge Destiny 2 fan. I view their raids and dungeons as the pinnacle of not just that game, but some of the best stuff that you can do in video games, period. Its team's chemistry nature, distinct settings, complex and well-designed mechanics, memorable bosses, worthwhile and varied loot, but most importantly, the memories that you make beating those raids for the first time with your friends. I always thought that nothing would ever come close. And mechanics wise, Final Fantasy XIV, it doesn't. But in terms of pure hype, spectacle and camaraderie, it absolutely matches what Destiny 2's raids and dungeons provide. Final Fantasy XIV provides 3 different experiences so far, at least to me. Typical dungeons, trials which act as boss fights, and then raids which are 24-player experiences. Dungeons are great, they're all memorable, visually, composed and playable. Usually, you clear several corridors of enemies before a boss, but there's still decent variety within them. Trials are your one-off boss fights. There's no traversing your way to the boss, it's just you and your team against it. Raids, well, these are 24-player experiences divided into 3 teams of 8, and I was not prepared for how fucking hype these events would be. The first raid I did, when it starts and all 24 players just rush forward with the score soaring in the background, was just incredible and so hype. Raids are the most mechanic heavy of the 3 activities. Attacks you need to learn, enemies you need to kill, barriers to destroy, etc. Honestly, I was not expecting these 3 activities to hold me in the way that they did. Like, I thought I would have little reason to replay them. But right now, I have done, just to experience some of them again. It also has to be noted that working together is a must. Each role is super important. If the tank ain't doing the job, you will not come out on top, that is for sure. If you lose your healer, the fight isn't going to last much longer. And without your DPS, you're not going to do the damage required. It's a perfect blend, as there's no forced voice chat, but it's easy enough to communicate through the game's text log, and there's times where I've not understood a mechanic, but teammates will use an ability to pull me away from a life-ending attack. Which brings me nicely to my next point. This community. It's the best I've ever seen in a video game, period. I've encountered like 0.5 of a dickhead once who was just being a bit elitist in 90 hours of playtime. It should be noted that my first ever Destiny raid nearly put me off playing Destiny 2 for life, same with the Division. At the start of every dungeon, raid, trial, everyone always says hello or thank you for playing, always encourages you if you're new, patient with you if you're learning, explains to you what you might want to do to get better gear. I've never encountered anything like it. Even just walking around in the open world or the game's hub areas, everything feels so alive, so much community, that it's just a joy to experience. It had the full circle effect where I redid a dungeon I'd done because I really enjoyed it and it was someone else's first time. And this time I got to help someone and teach them stuff. It's infectious. Not to mention how good the game's looking for group system really is. At a time where console wars are argued about for hours on end on Twitter, YouTube videos are disliked because someone else has a different opinion than you, and voice chat is just as toxic as the OG Modern Warfare 2 days, this feels like a genuine miracle in its own little vacuum where everything is just so good here. If there's one thing that made me understand why it's so loved, it's the community. I'm so happy that this game is going to make its way to Xbox because the community can expand even further. So, I've spoken about a few different things. Why you may play, but why am I playing? Like I said at the top of the video, Final Fantasy XVI was my first Final Fantasy experience in full. I've played Final Fantasy VII Remake, but it's hard to count that as a full first Final Fantasy. I play video games for a multitude of reasons, but one of the main ones is for an experience, a story of adventure, large set pieces with relatable and well written characters that really resonate with you, all embodied within a score that draws you in and fires you up. Final Fantasy XIV gives me that, and I'm surprised because it's an MMO at heart. Like I say, A Realm Reborn can be rough. You will feel the grind of doing certain quests. I'm looking at you, the quest line of getting ingredients for a wine. But under that MMO hood is a story with heart. Characters that feel real. There are a million games out there where you're the chosen one, and the same applies here. But in this adventure, you're made to feel it. Not just because you're in a suit of armour or have this golden sword, but because you're surrounded by other adventurers who will grow alongside you throughout the journey, that have their own moments, triumphs and tragedies. The Scions, the Flames, the Ascians, the Rulers, they all stand out, all with their own ambitions, motives, personalities. And Cid, well, you know, Cid is just the best. The best part is, even now, I've barely scratched the surface. I've got 3 expansions to work my way through before a new one drops in summer next year. The biggest testament that I can give is that in one of the greatest year of video games period, 2023, I am playing this game that celebrates its 10-year anniversary since the re-release of A Realm Reborn back in 2013. There's no live service fear of missing out. I can play them at my own pace, subscribe when I want, cancel when I want, and it'll all just be there waiting for me when I am ready. Final Fantasy XIV is one of gaming's greatest gifts, not just because of its sensational characters, meaty expansions, soaring soundtrack, unforgettable raids, welcoming community, or variety of gameplay styles. It's one of gaming's greatest gifts because it looks at you as the player and puts you first with respect, confidence and an aura that knows it has something special. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like button. It would help me out massively and I would really appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments if you've checked out Final Fantasy XIV. Truth is, if you enjoy just celebrating video games and you want more of that, hit the subscribe button. Have a terrific day and I'll catch you in the next one, Scions.